How do you make science content an engaging podcast? Should you launch with 1 episode or 4 or 5? This is Podcast Creators, where we get podcasting advice from real podcasters. On the show today, we have Vikram Baliga, host of Planthropology podcast, where he answers these questions and so much more. It was such a fun conversation, and I hope you really enjoy it. This interview was recorded using Riverside FM, so if you like the way this looks and or sounds, there's an affiliate link down in the description box below where you can try it out for yourself. Links for everything else we talk about today will also be in the description box below. All right, let's get to it. Hey, Vikram, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, not a problem. So why don't you first start off by just telling everybody your name and your show?
My name's Vikram Baliga, and I am the host of the Planthropology podcast.
You know, the Planthropology podcast is so easy to say after you hear someone say it. But when you're reading it, you're like,
that's exact.
I'm like Planthropology.
Yeah. Oh no, you are totally right about that. It's in fact, like, it's kind of like my name. I've had that same experience with people. Like, they read my name, they're like, "How do you pronounce it?" And then I say it, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." Yeah. So I figured, when I'm coming up with a podcast name, why not? Why break with tradition? Just keep rolling with that.
I think it's a really good name because you don't really just talk about like specific plants. I mean, you talk about all sorts of not only like plant related things, but also jobs and industries and trends and really just like a glimpse into what it's like to work and kind of live in the hobby or the career, really.
The name kind of came out of a conversation with a friend where we were talking about how some of the indigenous peoples in our area kind of manage the land through fire and other things like that.
Sure.
This guy, Kyle Tengler, actually ended up being my first guest on the podcast. I want to do something that's sort of about our human connection to plants and the environment and all of that. So I was like, oh, plant anthropology,
right.
Planthropology. And I wasn't as clever as I thought I was, because there's a book that was published quite a while ago. And when I was searching like podcast names and stuff, I was like, oh, great, Planthropology. Like that, nothing came up. I was like, great.
Right.
And then I was randomly searching for something else the other day, a few months later, and this book pops up and I was like, crap. But like, it hasn't been an issue, but I was not quite as clever as I was thinking I was. But
I think it's pretty clever. I mean, most podcasters type in their name into Google of their show and 1,000 things pop up. So I think you're in good company. I mean, I named my poor show True Crime. So, I mean, imagine that.
Well, but it's descriptive, right? Like, people know what to expect.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's right to the point. So maybe we can just really start by framing the context of the show. And we're going to get into, where you record and what you record on and all that. But let's start really with how long has your show been on? How many episodes are you in? Let's just give us the history real quick.
I started releasing like full episodes in November of 2019.
Sure.
So I'm coming up on 2 years. I'd put out a couple of little preview things before that, just so I could get indexed on, Apple and all the other places, and
of course
make sure that my show was able to go out when it actually launched. But yeah. So, I have called the show's birthday November 5th.
Okay.
Because that's when we released episode 1. I've got 75 episodes out right now. I think I just released the 75th. Now, like, if you look at the list, we're technically on episode like 56, but I keep putting out like bonus content and stuff like that. And I just run it all on the feed and pretty much if I release something that is not on my typical like quote unquote release schedule, whatever that actually means, I call it a bonus episode because it's just something extra, But yeah, 75 episodes. I'm looking forward to figuring out something exciting to do for the second anniversary of the show. I don't know what, but I'll come up with something.
Yeah. And how's the show doing? Are you happy with its performance?
Man, I really am. And it's such a subjective thing. And I'm pulling up stats right now as we talk,
Ooh,
but
nice.
I have been actually kind of blown away by how well the show has performed. Because like when I started, I was like, it's this niche little, plant podcast. Like, how many people really care? But I was gonna do it anyway
Yeah,
because
because you
it's
care.
something I just wanted to try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I care. And I figured, if there's like 20, 30, 40 diehard plant nerds out there that really get into it, like I'm happy, right?
Mhm.
I have found an audience. They enjoy the content. I get to tell some stories. As of today, though, like I said, we're not quite at 2 years. As of today, I'm sitting at about 53,000 downloads.
Unbelievable.
Averaging about 4,000 downloads a month. I think right now, anyway, I'm averaging about 4,000 downloads per month. And I don't know for sure. I'm waiting on my first like 1,000 download episode for like 30 days.
Sure.
And I'm gonna get close. The next one that's coming up was it'll be 30 days old on September 3rd. And I'm at 930 downloads right now. I'm so close.
Wow.
So I think, here in the next month or two, if things keep sort of growing like they have been, I'll be, fairly easily breaking 1,000 downloads an episode, which, I know Spotify's not going to call me and be like, hey, we want to buy you for $100 million, but
Maybe not 100.
Yeah, no, $36. No, but like for what I do and for the content and for this niche science podcast, I am just beyond thrilled that people enjoy it as much as they do.
To me, it's incredible because, I mean, have you bought ads for it or is this solely grassroots?
Some of both. I think I'm going to say it's primarily grassroots. Full disclosure, I'm an indie podcaster, but my department, so I work at Texas Tech University. I'm a lecturer. I run a greenhouse, and they were interested in having some different means of like outreach, like talking about what we do and talking about the science in general, just getting people interested. And so they've been pretty supportive. Like they've helped with some equipment, and for a while I had a pretty small advertising budget. They're like, okay, you can spend a little bit of money on getting the word out a little bit. So I've bought a couple of ads.
Sure.
I tried Facebook ads at first, and I just didn't see the return on investment. I hear some people swear by it, but in my experience, it has let me back up. It did a good job of driving people to the Facebook page, right? And that's valuable.
Sure.
But I didn't see the conversion to listeners that I was hoping for. So I have advertised on a couple of actual listening platforms, like apps. So I've run an ad on Podcast Addict.
Sure.
And I've done a couple on Overcast. And so they're a little more expensive. Like, when I ran my first one, it was $150 or something, but that's really grown a lot. So now you're going to pay, depending on what category you're in, $300-$500 for an ad. So it's pretty expensive.
It's been crazy. Like 2 years ago on Overcast, you could buy an all, like they have the all category. You could buy that for less than $1,000 pretty regularly. You have to watch it.
Wow.
But it dipped under $1,000. Now I've seen it up in the $3,000 range.
Which is interesting, right? Like I know the pricing is driven by how many people are buying ads and et cetera. But I found a pretty good return on investment on that. Just looking at my stats, it says, oh, you got 100 whatever subscribers for your ad, whatever. I've found that, 30-40% of them, based on just, app statistics, are sticking around pretty consistently. And that's really not bad. Whereas I run a $30-$40 ad on Facebook for a week and I get maybe a listener or two.
If you can even find
I don't find that there's a lot of return.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's so interesting because just right now at this moment in time, there's a lot of Twitter buzz around, do Facebook ads work or don't work, without, being too specific. But it's interesting that you've had some experience and I've also had some experience, but I admit that I'm not a social media ad expert, right? Like it's really easy to buy an Overcast ad. It goes where you want it to go and it probably performs at the peak it can possibly perform. Right. But on Facebook, you have to convert first. You have to get them to click the ad, which is a project in itself. Then once they're on your page, if you send them to your page, like you have to get them to convert to your podcast. If you send them directly to your podcast, it's just, there's a science to it that requires, I think, a level of investment in time and money, experiment money that, before it can really do much.
I'd rather spend a little bit more on something that is putting my content in front of the type of person that's already consuming podcast content or science content or education content or whatever. And the way that Facebook runs a lot of their analytics, from my experience and from what I know, which again, this could be wrong. So if, Zuckerberg wants to come after me, that's fine. But like they'll show, like you'll look at your statistics like, oh man, my ad's gone out to 5,000 people, but it may have shown the same person the ad 100 times. Right. And so every impression of that gets registered. And so it's hard to differentiate based or, what is a unique impression versus a repeat. And again, if it work and if you're out there listening and it works for you, it'd be great. Keep doing it.
I agree.
It just has not been my experience.
Yeah. And I think somebody's going to build, a YouTube video that decodes this for podcasters, but the ones I've watched so far, and I've tried every one of them, like I've got $500 burned maybe 4 or 5 times per video, because they always say like, if you're not, $300 or $500 is like the minimum to make to see if it works. You got to run it for 3 months or whatever. So I've done that maybe 4 or 5 times and I've had similar results as you, which, it just seems like you're throwing money away, but I guess, it's hard to know for sure. And without being an expert in it, I don't want to make any conclusions, but I do love like in-app advertising is my favorite. Like I have stuff running all the time. It works. It's expensive, but it works.
It is. And something I want to try that I haven't yet, I may wait till the new year so I can track some of the statistics a little bit better. I'm a data guy and I like clean breaks and stuff. I'm a scientist. And so I really enjoy the number side of it too. But something I've been seeing pop up on Twitter, like Earbuds has been talking about it and a couple others have been talking about it, is like newsletter advertising, like podcast newsletter ads. And, the rate structure that I've seen is a little bit different. It's more like per day or whatever than, per month, like you get on Overcast. But there, I'm always open to try something new and just see like what works, what doesn't, and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think Earbuds is a good one. I've advertised on Earbuds a couple of times, not for listeners, but for people to submit to Indie Drop-In, and it was effective.
Okay.
So it worked for me. I can imagine if you maybe sponsored 1 week and made them all plant gardening, something related to your field, I would bet you'll see something. I don't know what it costs for the listening side. I was really someone else even did the newsletter. I just put my name on it, which is how I like it. But I think if you curate it, I would bet you get a decent return. I would love to see the math. Like you said, like if you do a clean break and then you do it, like please share because I'd love to.
Oh, I will. Absolutely.
I'd love to know.
Yeah.
So where do you record this show? You said you have some support.
So normally what's cool is I have the opportunity, the privilege to kind of do it at work. It's part of the outreach efforts that we do. And, I interview some folks that are affiliated with the university and a lot that aren't. and they've been cool with that. So I'm like, okay. So, in my office, it's funny because I have done zero soundproofing in my office. It's a glass box. Like I have windows literally on 3 sides of my office, which is super weird when students walk by the way. So I've done like zero soundproofing, but you normally record there. Today, I'm actually recording from home in my kitchen. I have a little setup that I keep here with an older microphone that I used to use in the office, and a little, 2-channel soundboard. But normally, and I don't know how much you want me to get into the gear side of it, but I'm a gearhead too. But I run in quote unquote in studio or in the office. I run a Shure SM7B, run through a cloud lifter into a Mackie Notepad, or I'm sorry, Mackie Pro FX 8. So it's a big soundboard for bigger soundboard than what I need for that. But there's some I like the amount of control I have on that board. The only problem I have with it, and if you're out there looking for a soundboard, is it doesn't send multi-tracks, right? You can put in 8 inputs, but you still get a single out from the USB.
Which is a problem.
It is a problem. And, I have enough experience with a soundboard that I can mix it on the board with whoever's in studio recording with me, that I'm usually pretty happy. But if you're new and if you've never messed with all the knobs and stuff on one of these, they can be a little overwhelming. And so I would recommend definitely, if you're going to buy one, make sure it does multi-track out. Get either the Rode,
the Rodecaster,
whatever the Rode one is. Yeah. Or something by Zoom that'll easily multi-track. Yeah,
I use the Rodecaster Pro and I like it, but there are some things about it that I think it's great for a hobbyist podcaster, but as you start to turn it into a real job, if you ever get, if a podcaster ever gets to that level, I think you quickly realize that it's really a consumer device, and it's not super great for anything other than its specific intended purpose. So even using it while we're talking here, I'll go in and probably clean a bunch of stuff up. I'll, denoise, it doesn't have the most perfect noise, kind of noisy inputs. And, it's designed for somebody to just podcast by press and start, which is great.
Right.
It got me, I've done 150 plus episodes on it. So it's lived its life for sure.
Sure. Well, I know that's good. And you've gotten, sounds like your money's worth out of it. So that's good. And, I think that what's interesting to me about podcasting is that again, I'm kind of a gearhead, so I love the new stuff. And it's kind of a problem because I end up spending more money than I need to on stuff from I do some photography. So from cameras to musical equipment to whatever else, I end up I need the new thing. But in general, the entry barriers are fairly low. If you've got a decent headset with a reasonable microphone, even if you run through your iPhone, you can get decent audio quality as long as you're willing to sit in your closet or go somewhere that there's not a lot of background noise. I would say maybe the lower end your gear is, the more you have to pay attention to ambient because it's harder to clean it up sometimes. But in general, the entry barriers are pretty low.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I've talked to people that use a $40 mic, and I've talked to people who are using $4,000 mics. And I can tell you that there's not a $3,000, $960 difference, right? It's more the gearhead in you that says, I want to try to get this awesome microphone. I can tell a 1% difference, so it makes me happy. But your audience is listening to it at a much lower bit rate than what the microphone can do anyway. And I think a lot of people really overspend. But the microphone that you have at the office, this one's not too bad either. What is this, an Audio Technica?
Yeah, this is an Audio Technica AT 2035 condenser. So I like the tone I get out of a condenser mic. It's just there's some other
Yeah.
considerations. Again, ambient. You have to make sure you've got good clean phantom
Hmm.
power and all that. But
Yeah.
no, I highly recommend these mics for
Yeah.
sure. For the $125 they cost or whatever they are, it's really a good
Yeah.
mic.
Yeah. The condensers, you got to be careful. Like you said, you got to go in the closet, or you got to have high end power. You can't have the kids running around in the background. Like, there's a lot of constraints with a condenser, but when it sounds good, man, it sounds so good.
You get some real rich tones out of
Yeah.
it. It's nice to have.
So let's talk about the beginning of the podcast, right? So you're a PhD plant scientist. I mean, you're living the life, right? Your family owns an orchard. You teach in a university. It seems reasonable that you would think, I want to start a plant podcast. I mean, to me. So talk me through how did that happen, and how did you start?
So I mentioned my first guest earlier, Kyle Tengler, and we've been good friends for since I started my master's. What? Oh, good Lord, 11 years
Yeah.
ago. I feel like I'm getting old now. Which, by the way, this is an aside, but I just started this semester, and I realized that there's probably less than 5% of my students that were born before the year 2000 now. And that was really upsetting.
Yeah. Don't those
Really
realizations, like today is my birthday. So you got to chill out
Oh, happy
on
birthday.
those.
So sorry.
Yeah, no, it's
Try not to
completely
ruin it.
fine. All day it's been revelations of how I'm on the other side of the cliff, so it's totally fine.
Oh man. But yeah, so my friend and I were talking, Kyle and I were talking one day, and we're just kind of joking around, and I said, "Oh man, this would make a great podcast." And we laughed.
Yeah,
We're like,
exactly.
whatever. But then months and months, probably 10 months later, I was like, our new department chair has been talking about how do we do better outreach? What other avenues can we use? All those things. And so in my previous career to this, I was an extension educator. So I worked with Texas A&M University at the time and did community education. And at that time, I was using every avenue I could to get information out. So I was a weekly guest on 2 radio shows. I did TV news. I did videos and YouTube videos and social media and kind of everything I could find to get my message out. But I really had never messed with podcasts before. And so when we were talking about new and different outlets, I was like, okay, I'm pretty comfortable with these other things. I think this sounds like fun. And I'm actually compared to a lot of folks, I'm a reasonably new adopter to podcasting on either side of the mic. The first podcast I ever listened to was a show called Potterless by Mike Schubert. It's a Harry Potter. I'm such a nerd, it's a Harry Potter podcast, and my friend was like, "Hey, this is funny. You should listen to it." And it is. It's a great show. But that was probably in 2018. I'm new to the game. And so anyway, when we're getting to this point where he's like, okay, we got to figure out new ways to get the message out and talk about science and all of that, I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. And I have always been interested in storytelling. I don't as much anymore read for fun because I don't have the time to do it. I do audiobooks and stuff, but through high school, junior high, college, I was an avid reader. I would stay up till 2, 3 in the morning just reading whatever I could get my hands on, from science fiction, fantasy to classic literature, and really anything. And so I've always been really interested in storytelling. And so I have always thought of science as our means, and this is going to sound probably pretty cheesy, but I've thought of it as our means of helping the universe tell its story. There's all this stuff that exists, but it doesn't necessarily speak to us on its own very well, right? Just because for various reasons. But I've always thought of science as oh, how cool is it that we can pick some of these things apart and tell the story. So I wanted to help tell the stories of the scientists that are studying the planet and studying ecosystems and plants and climate change and soil and water and everything in between, food production. And I thought this would be a fun way to do it. And
Yeah. And this stuff is really contained in the industry too. Like if you talk to people who work on physics or even like particle physics, the stuff that they know about particle physics would be very interesting to a lay person if told in the right story, right?
Mhm.
Like sometimes I'll be on Google News and I'll be, looking at the science section and something will catch me because whoever wrote it in a way that, a dummy can understand why it's important, right?
Sure.
And when it comes to like technical documents, I have to be careful of that too. So, cause I'm a technologist by, what my day job is. So when I write papers, I have to think, okay, like there's 40 acronyms in this paper. Like no one is going to read this. I have to back it off and write it in a way that it's a story versus, just this deluge of information. And, so I think it's really important for science podcasts to break out of this, kind of sphere of influence that they currently have and get out to the lay person somehow. Right.
Hmm. And there's a lot of great shows that I sort of took as kind of inspiration as I was getting
Mhm.
into it. There's a great podcast, or there's two great podcasts about animals that I listen to. One is called Varmints,
Mhm.
and Paul and Donna have been doing this for years now. I mean, they are well seasoned. They have a great product they put
Yep.
out. And then another podcast called Just the Zoo of Us by Ellen and Christian Weatherford. And they started a few months before I did, and they're just knocking it out of the park right
Mhm.
now. And they tell stories. And what's cool about, I think, those shows, which, mine is a little bit different in this way, is that none of the hosts are like animal scientists. They're not people who study these things like professionally. They just do their homework. Like they spend the time and do the work to make sure that they're telling the story right, that they're giving good information. Another show that I think I've based probably sometimes more than I realize off of is a show called Ologies with Allie
Mhm.
Ward. And Allie Ward is a longtime science communicator, not a scientist herself, but she's a brilliant communicator.
Sure.
And so she's got a couple of shows on TV, like she does CBS Innovation Nation, like on Saturday mornings. But she started this show, and her tagline is "Ask smart people stupid questions," and that's such a good
Right.
tag because she just goes and talks to scientists about what they do. So I think I sort of framed the human element of my show where we talk more about the person doing the
Yeah.
work than the work itself. Probably sort of off of
Yeah.
that.
No, I think that's really interesting. So when you started your podcast, we heard, kind of how it happened, but did you go and try to make a launch plan? Did you have any sort of strategy? And if so, what is it?
Maybe not as much as like I think if I had to start it again, I would do things a little differently. Um, I so the first things I did is I started some social media
Mm-hmm.
accounts just to start getting the word, hey, I'm doing this thing,
Yeah.
whatever. I put up a couple of preview episodes. I got I think before I launched, I had 4 or 5 episodes in the can. So I took some sound bites and stuff from those and did a couple of quick previews
Sure.
again just to kind of get
Yeah.
indexed, get people aware of it. Um, but then, when I launched, I just dropped one episode and I was like, let's see how it goes. I think a lot of people now will release two or
Yeah.
three when they launch, just so people that like to binge can sort of like dive into the content a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more. But at the time, I was trying to finish a dissertation, which was probably not the right time to start a podcast, in all honesty. Uh, and all this stuff. And so I was like, okay, I've got like 5 episodes recorded, and I need these to last me as long as they
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
And
I need
so
5 weeks
I
out
did
of
them one at
this.
a time. Yes, 100%. And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, I'm gonna drop them. And when I started, I was pretty religious about first and third Tuesday, and that's it. Over time, I've gotten way more wobbly with that,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't release less than that.
Right.
That is my drop dead. Like twice a month is I will get 2 episodes out a month. but a lot of times I'll put more content out than that if I've got extra stuff to put out. If it's more like time sensitive or
Hmm.
whatever, I'll throw some extra stuff out. Probably kind of just whenever I want to.
Yeah. So you're saying if you had to go back and launch it again, you would probably launch with 4 or 5 episodes to start, or?
I think I would. I think I would. It feels like I know when I find a new podcast,
Hmm.
I like to be able to like spend an afternoon listening to it. I don't know. That's just the type of like media consumer I am. I would rather, binge through it a little bit. So I think if I had to do it again, I would go back and make sure I had some extra episodes and drop at least 3
Hmm.
at launch. Whether that's better or not, it's hard to say, but I think that suits my listening style more. So that's probably what I would do.
I think that's smart because you don't want people to hear your episode and then go to your show and it's just a single episode. I mean, no one wants to be first. So, like in anything.
Yeah, and no, and you're absolutely right. And I think and it's an interesting thing that even like having 2 or 3 on there almost feels like more social proof, sort of that the show's going to be
Yeah.
around. Like I don't want to commit my time and my energy to following this and all this stuff if they're going to do one episode and then it's gone.
Yeah. I
Right?
completely
It
agree.
maybe shows a little more commitment to it.
So what kind of problems did you have with the show as you were growing it from zero, like trying to get it to where you're in the groove?
A lot of it was on like a personal side, like even having experience in media, just learning how to interview
Hmm.
people. Like it's largely an interview based show. And, how do you ask questions that are interesting? And how do you, um, I don't know, take these very complicated topics or these I mean, people are complicated, right? So they have this long life
Sure.
experience. And in an hour show or less, it's hard to like chase every rabbit that gets
For
brought
sure.
up. So like, and I've gotten a couple of comments and reviews that are saying, well, I wish they would dive into some of these topics more. And I'm like, yeah, no, me too. But
Yeah.
this would be 3
Right.
hours long, and we can't. And so some of the problems I faced early on is really just dialing in my format, figuring out how I wanted the flow of the show to go, how to chase the most important rabbits and let the other ones
Hmm.
go. Because we do that, the show kind of goes where it goes, and I don't do a ton of um, like prep work for it. I kind of take some basic notes on the person I'm interviewing, and their title and kind of what they do, and then I sort of just let it develop as it develops. I have some sort of types of questions that I tend to ask, but I like to be able to keep it fairly fluid and just follow the conversation. I want it to be like if you heard a couple of people talking about their lives in a coffee
Hmm.
shop, that's kind of what I want it to feel like. And that I have learned is a pretty delicate balancing act of keeping a conversational show or conversational interview from being too
Hmm.
chaotic, but also on the other side not to feel like scripted.
Right.
That's a really delicate balance.
So what do you think the future of the show is? Do you want to turn this into an income producing activity, or is it just for social reach for the message?
You know, if it started to generate income, I wouldn't be mad at it. Like I'm not gonna
Yeah,
turn
like
that
no
down.
sponsor.
I Yeah, no, I'm not interested. Like I do have to be careful since I am affiliated with the university. I can only take I have to be careful like who a sponsor would be to make sure there's no conflicts of
Yeah.
interest and those
But
kinds
they
of
don't
things.
own the
But
show though. That you
no,
own it 100%. They're
yeah,
just really kind of indulging you in order to get some kind of side benefit. Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Yes, that's yes. And so like which is
Yeah.
nice, and so but I for the same time though it's a state institution, so there's always more
Right.
rules. But no, if a sponsor came and said, "Hey, you know what? We want to pay you to do this," I'd probably figure out how to make that work. But for me, I can recognize that I'm pretty privileged in this. That I have a great job. I have other like sources of income through family businesses and things like that, you know, are a lot of work, but provide a little bit, you know, like if I don't put out an episode or get 10,000 downloads or something, I'm not going hungry, right?
Right.
It's very much a side gig for me, but at the same time, like I am very invested in the stories we're telling. Like I think it's important that the content I'm putting out gets out there, or I wouldn't spend as much time and effort doing it.
Yeah.
So again, sponsors or no, or monetization or no, I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can. I plan to keep doing it as long as I can. But again, if you're out there listening and you're like, you know, I really want to sponsor a plant show, hit me up. We'll talk.
Yeah. I mean, you have highly engaged listeners. I mean, the industry is not humongous, so
Right.
you know, it's probably a nice niche to sponsor, I would think.
Yeah.
So if there's something you want to do new with the show, what kind of things are you thinking about? How to expand, how to improve? What's just the thought process?
You know, that's a really good question. That's always a little nerve-wracking for a creator,
For
I
sure.
think. Is like, how do I there's equal parts for me of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I need to constantly be improving, right? There's, again, lots of delicate balances to kind of try to figure out and you know, tight ropes to walk. I mean, I think as far as the basic format of the show, I really love the interview style, the casual conversation kind of style. I think I went back for better or worse and listened to some of my early episodes after I got a couple of comments recently. And I was like, you know, I have gotten better at this. I've dialed it in more. I'm a little more focused than I was. But I've started putting out other kinds of content where I do some solo episodes where if there are questions that people ask me, like technical, like plant questions, people ask me regularly, I'll do an episode answering one or two of
Sure.
them. Or if there's something that is kind of going on in the industry that I want to address, I'll do an episode answering it. I've started a couple of series. I've done one that I haven't really been great with keeping up with called Plants and World Traditions. And so like I did one about Christmas trees and about different kinds of plant-based drinks and
Wow.
like alcoholic, non-alcoholic. I've done one about like spring traditions in different cultures throughout time. So I've started experimenting with some different types of content. And it's been generally pretty well received overall.
Nice.
I want to get into more like video content, other mediums.
I know you're dying to talk about your
Just
TikTok.
oh man, okay, yeah. So I've started TikTok. I think like so many millennials, I was so bored last year. Man, I was so bored. I was like, and I was, you know, I kind of lurked on TikTok for a while, and there's a lot of funny stuff on there. There's a lot of really weird stuff on there, but there's a lot of funny
Yeah.
stuff. And I was like, you know, this is another way to reach maybe a different demographic. And so I do a variety of dumb things on TikTok that are fun, and some of it is like really plant related. Some of it is like teaching and education related. One of my more popular videos, I as a like lecturer or professor or whatever, for bonus points on one of my students' exams, I have them draw me their favorite animal, and I give them bonus points for it. And some of them are real good, and some of them are like, here's a squiggly line and I'm going to call it a snake, you know,
Yeah.
like, and there's a whole spectrum in between. So I've started which I haven't done one in a while, but I've started a TikTok series where I show these like bonus doodles that my students make and talk about them. And that's been like super popular relative to the rest of my content, I'll
Yeah.
say.
Wow. I had no idea that's what was going on. Like because I follow you on TikTok and I came across those and you're like, which one do you like, A or B? And I was like, oh, well, I choose. And then you're like, you're like, hey, the A is not getting any love. And then people are like, no, I like A better. A seems more creative. And, you know, like, I just thought to myself, like, this is the craziest content that I've ever seen. And then my favorite one is one of your least performing videos where you tell this, what is it? Is it a horse or is it a donkey?
It's a horse.
It's a horse. You tell this horse a joke, like on your way to work. Like it's it's the craziest thing, but I laugh out loud at that.
and I don't know how I even thought about. So this horse lives like belongs to one of my parents' neighbors, and
Mhm.
so they keep my son sometimes. So when I go to pick him up or drop him off or whatever, or when I'm headed out to the orchard, I'll drive by this horse.
Yeah.
And if it's up close to the fence, I roll down my window and I tell it a joke about a horse.
Yeah.
Like I tell it horse jokes, and it's the stupidest thing I think I've ever come up with, and I love it. I laugh so hard after I post those. I don't care if I don't care if they get like 50 views. I love those videos.
Yeah. What's crazy about it is you're like, hey, and the horse is like,
This guy again.
yeah, it's like, and then you tell like you're actually, it's just, I don't know, like the elements of it. I don't understand how those videos don't go viral because the horse is clearly listening to the joke and at least in some of them, and it does not laugh. The horse does not laugh.
No, horse doesn't think it's funny.
Yeah.
That's showbiz.
Yeah. Like, you win some, you lose some. All right. So I know we went long, but I think we were having a lot of fun. So maybe tell everybody where they could find you and Planthropology.
So I'm again on pretty much all the social media platforms.
Mm-hmm.
The handles are a little bit different because of the length of the word Planthropology. So on Instagram, I'm Planthropology Pod. On Twitter, I'm Planthropology _ because somebody beat me to Planthropology. And then on Facebook, I think I'm just Planthropology. And so it's a little different, but if you search for the word, it's anthropology with a PL on the front. I look for the drawing of the tree, the bristlecone pine, which a friend of mine and one of the guests of the show designed for me, Dr. Beth Nichols, which I love. I love that logo, by the way.
Yeah, it's fun.
You can find me in those places. I'm on all the podcatchers. I have a website, planthropologypod.com, which is mostly just, archives of my episodes or whatever, with a little additional info. But I'm not too hard to find. For better or worse, I am a very public human, and I put a lot of content on the internet. So I'm out there.
Well, I'll definitely put all the links in the description below so people can find you. And I appreciate you so much for coming on the show. And I think the show went well, and I think we got a lot of good insights for indie creators.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you giving a couple of platforms for the indie creators out there, because, from your true crime, scary time, comedy shows and this and some of the other stuff you do, like, there's the podcast space is changing, and to have people interested in still maintaining the indie vibe of podcasting, I think is really important.
Well, I appreciate it. I think, little increments add up to big increments over time. So if I can add a little here and there, then I'm doing my job. But, and if I can have fun at the same time, then it's a win-win.
Yeah, for sure.
Vikram, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much to Vikram for coming on the show and sharing his wisdom. You should definitely check out the Planthropology podcast. You'll learn about some plants, but also about interesting people that work in the industry, which I always think is fun. We'll put links to everything we talked about in the show notes below. So if you're interested in that, you can just click the link. We also talked to lots of other podcast creators. So if you like this content, click the like button, click the subscribe button, and click the bell so you don't miss anything. You can also click one of these boxes up here and go right to another interview. Nice and easy. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.